So it seems as though over the past few days, I've had a lot to say about what I like to call progress hijackers. And these consist of perfectionism, people pleasing, performance, and procrastination. And so, with that, I'm going to continue our conversation on how perfectionism specifically robs us of wealth and wisdom. Welcome back to our conversation, Unwrapping Courage, a gift for your soul this season. I am excited that you are back yet again for our 25 days of soul work. It is day 20. Day 20. Only 5 more days that we're going to be having a conversation together, but I do plan on continuing to connect with you on a regular basis. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's get back to our conversation. And before we jump right into it, I do want to encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. Also, be sure to download our complimentary resource at www.gobraveLLC.com. And even before I get ahead of myself, for those who are new, my name is Jaleesa Dallas. I'm an author, coach, and consultant. I help individuals and organizations cultivate courage. This looks like breaking barriers to their success, bolstering their belief with greater confidence, and building courageous behavior to optimize their life, creating belonging internally and externally in community. And so, before we get started, one last thing is I would love to connect with you live, whether that's in person in Northeast Ohio or virtually at our Revolutionize Your Resolutions strategy session and workshop. And this is where I'm giving all of my gems, all of the insights, including an elaboration on some of the things that we've talked about throughout this series, and giving you strategies, insights, tools on how to navigate your first quarter of 2025. So with that being said, I want you to connect January 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern, again, either in person or virtually. And I know that this is going to be a blessing to you to help you to execute on everything that you have held up on for whatever reason in 2024. We're going to implement your time, your efforts, your commitments, and the finances that you put toward growing yourself into completion, into execution for 2025. So join me. Now, let's go ahead and get this conversation started on the right foot. So in yesterday's chat, we talked about perfectionism. We define that as something that is overly and excessively dependent on standards and meeting certain expectations as essentially absolute. Then we talked about wisdom being the principal thing, the thing that we need and have liberally. And then we also talked about wealth, and that being our way to creatively solve problems and provide solutions to people other than ourselves. So what does perfection do to rob us of that wisdom and wealth? And so we talked about, first things first, is that focus on avoidance and denial. And so I want to go into greater depth of that particular one, and then we have 2 more that I'm going to address. And essentially that's our fear of failure and of harsh judgment, because the perfectionist is always thinking about the mistakes, the hard issues or challenges they may face that don't seem to go as planned. This is the fear of situations being outside of their control. So for example, I facilitated or had a desire to facilitate an event a few summers ago that really didn't go as planned. I had everything in place that needed to be in place. The people, the food, the venue, all the things, to the point to where I felt like I was giving people a really good deal. Less than $100, you would be staying overnight. You didn't have to worry about accommodations. It was just all laid out. And guess how many people I had register? 2. And guess what happened? I had to refund their money. Yes, there was failure all up and through that. And fortunately, I had a little bit of grace given to me, because in that particular instance, what I realized through someone prophetically speaking in my life, I was not ready to receive the hearts of the women that I would be ministering to at that time. I wasn't ready. And so God did me a favor to hide me in that season that others would not have interest in what I'm doing so that he could better prepare me to be able to move forward in that. And so perfectionism would have a focus on the failure versus seeing the opportunity. And that will rob us of the wisdom and the wealth that he has for us. Also, under that line item of focusing on avoidance and denial is our resistance to healing. Yes, we will resist healing because guess what? That pain is validating. That frustration is validating. That discomfort is validating. We can constantly talk about and complain about what's not right. And when we get people to feed into that, it's validating. But when we're focusing on those areas, that's us feeding into perfectionism, thereby robbing us of the wisdom and wealth for which God has designed for us to have. So the second thing, when it comes to what perfectionism does to us, when robbing us of the wealth and wisdom that God has for us, he has us refuse help. I was a part of an organization, which I shared before, nonprofit, and their slogan was asking for help is a sign of strength. That is not true for the perfectionist. Asking for help is like weakness. It's like the Wicked Witch of the West, like, I'm melting. It is like so in opposition to the perfectionist. So much so that there is a feeling of inadequacy and a feeling of really a lack of trust in other people. They much rather trust and rely on themselves and not take any support from someone else. And that's completely not how we are to operate, especially in this thing called life, this journey called life. We need connection and we need people in order to thrive. And then that third area is that overthinking, meaning that limits our ability to move forward. A perfectionist will rob you of wealth and wisdom by way of overthinking, the overconsumption of information, so much so that we are stuck and stagnant and there's no momentum. When in actuality, we must keep moving forward. We must take that thing or the things that we're learning, the information we're acquiring, and actually implement it. And so, what do we do to override all of this perfectionist tendency that would rob us of wealth and wisdom? Well, essentially, we need to stop comparing ourselves, because a lot of time this perfectionist behavior has to do with us looking at what everyone else is doing and trying to be better than or more than or the best at, which there's not a problem with being better, with having the best, but when it's derived off of or fueled by other people's demise, then it's not good. It's not good at all. We have to stop comparing, because in that box of comparison is also competition and confinement. We feel like we have to beat the other person to the race, when in actuality that race is only our own to run. And then confinement is that we have to isolate ourselves, when actually isolation is selfishness. And incubation is actually God cultivating, building us, growing us, and sometimes will separate us and bring us to a place of consecration. And when you're operating in perfectionism, that's not what you're going towards. You're going towards, I don't need anybody. I don't want anybody to be involved in what I'm doing. I'm just going to do this by myself. And that does not help anyone. Instead, we want to celebrate our wins, even the small ones. Celebrate ourselves along the way and not just wait for that big event to happen. We also want to cheer other people on. Celebrate with other people about their accomplishments, because that way we won't get into that comparison trap. And then also we're going to want to collaborate with people. The greatest influence that we can have is in community and in connection, partnership, and relationship with other people. We also want to do something different about our perspective. We often, if we're living in perfectionism, we're thinking future tense, which is where that anxiety and that overwhelm and those concerns come out. When in actuality, we're forgetting about the present. The present moments are what are most valuable, because we don't know if we'll have tomorrow. So we must think about what's happening in the present so that we can override this perfectionism and actually experience the wisdom and wealth that God has for us. And then lastly, we want to speak life over our situations. Yes, failure is going to happen, but think of it as an opportunity for growth. Think about it as a new strategy to approach a situation or circumstance. Speaking life, we're going to be better off for it. It's going to be positive, and we can lean into that much more than speaking negatively over our situations. Well, we have come to the conclusion of this conversation, and I hope that it has been helpful to you and kind of gave you a little bit more depth as to how to take that perfectionism, throw it out the door, so that way we can acquire the wisdom and wealth that God has for us in life and business, our families, careers, and ultimately to advance his kingdom. And so I would love for you to do me the favor of commenting, and subscribing. Also sharing this with someone that you know. Also, be sure to download our complimentary resource so that you can follow along on this journey at www.gobraveLLC.com. And then, if you are able, I would love for you to register for our Revolutionize Your Resolutions strategy session and workshop, where we will go into deeper depth as to how to better prepare yourself for the first quarter of 2025 and beyond. I would love to have an exchange with you and connect with you in this session, and I'm grateful to you already for those who will plan to register. And again, you could do so at www.gobraveLLC.com. And until next time, let your soul work be your best work to a better you. Bye.